okay, the connection between science and engineering. We spoke about AI engineering workshops and disconnect between education and work life. So
exactly.
But going back a bit to the PDF, I think, since I actually did a lot of work with this in my PhD as well for 15, 20-ish years ago, and trying to see, how we really can take information that is written in like unstructured or semi-structured way, like semi-structured would be web pages or documents or PDF documents. Yeah. But then for machines that are rather stupid still, to try to understand it, they need to have it in more structured fashion. And I heard you don't really like PDFs.
No, I don't really do it. I mean, the things we see in research and in certain applications is that we have great models, great language models, and they work given the premise that you have clean text. So and then step back.
Clean text would be like a Wikipedia article, or
yeah, something that you can extract coherent or not coherent, but you have like the orthography or the typography of the pages is there. You have the paragraphs, you have the perhaps the headings and stuff. There's no broken up words, there's no repeated headers and footers and footnotes and pictures and tables and such. And then if you have language models that are supposed to work with real life PDF data, then you have to step back because you introduce a lot of noise. I'm not sure how much noise, but there is noise, and then you have to counter that somewhere. So you will actually degenerate the performance of the model just by having dirty text. Let's call it dirty text.
And dirty, you mean basically that we have this kind of semi-structured information about this is a header or this is a table? Yes. Or what do you mean with
like if you take a PDF and you convert it to text some way, and then you look at the text, then you will see that there are certain artifacts that you cannot easily isolate, that this is because of this particular PDF producer or anything, but typically you have the page numbering, or you have like a sentence is split across pages, and then you have a sentence, and then you have a hyphen, then you have a number of the page, and then you have the header of the next page, and then you have the sentence continuing. And if you have this for 100 times in a document, it will affect information that's in there.
So what do you think the right solution for that is? Is to get away of PDFs?
No, unfortunately, I don't think we can do that.
You said how many billions of PDFs was published last year?
I think Adobe claimed that people had opened 2.5 billion PDFs in their products only last year. Or before that,
so it won't go away easily.
It won't go away. I mean, if you look at, if you have a PDF URL, a link pointing to a PDF, and you click it in any browser, it will open in the browser. So it's a ubiquitous format. It will stay.
It's an industry standard these days.
Yeah, it's an industry standard.
So it's a perfect way of rendering things on screen or in print, and it's a good output format, but it's a really bad input format.
Have you seen any? I mean, you're an expert in NLP models, but I haven't, at least myself, seen like a PDF language model.
But there are actually. I haven't delved that deep in that subject, but there are document understanding. It's not the old document understanding thing that we used to do back in the 90s or noughties, but this is like you have ways of using the page layout as well as the language. So there are different BERT models for actually taking into account the position on the page where the text is now.
I saw something from Google. They had a table extractor or something. They could actually understand the different pieces of text depending on the row and the column position they had. But I haven't really seen something that can take like a generic PDF document and just no matter where it is, it can still understand.
Well, let's just put it this way: there are companies out there doing great financially by doing this manually. I mean, so I've been speaking to lots of companies. Because of the past years, the projects that we've been doing at RISE. And one of the companies, I guess they charge around multiple tens of thousands of pounds for a single client doing a few thousand PDFs. And they have an elaborate pipeline of cleaning and manual intervention and active learning and everything they need. And this is in the financial domain because as far as
they manually extract the information, right? It's not.
Or they train. They train. Yeah, it's learning based, but they train it, and they didn't really tell, but they had me understand that it's active learning based, and they
may claim it. I would argue, question if it's not really true, but okay.
They were really helpful, by the way, to guide me right about this. But and they are working in the financial domain because in the US, I think all the filings to the SEC and so on are actually available in XML format. But this is not the case in Europe. So they have for like calls and such and conference calls for financial entities across Europe, they work with this and extract the data. And there's this is to say that there's a business of doing this, a large business. That's because of the format.
Yeah.
Yes.
But would you say PDFs, in what way is that worse than HL documents or Word documents or something else?
I'm not really sure if they are worse. It's just that every client or every person or every stakeholder or peer I've talked to that claims to have data, it's in PDF. So if I go to...
so it's your biggest headache because that's what you encounter all the time.
Yes.
I think this is a great topic to speak up later about, I think. And we can certainly hear a lot of companies saying, we have so much data.
Yes.
But then that's a PDF format. It's not really organized and structured in a proper way. But before we move into that, let me just start by welcoming here Fredrik Ohlsson. It's a true pleasure to have you here.
Thank you.
I'm very passionate about NLP myself, and you're a true expert in this in Sweden. And it's great to have you here.
Thank you very much for having me.
Yeah, and I'm looking forward to the theme today. What's the theme for today? I think NLP and data was mentioned as the core themes. Maybe?
Yeah.
I hope so.
NLP and data readiness and perhaps other things like science and education and engineering and things like that.
Good. Fantastic.
Awesome. But with that, perhaps you can start by just giving a quick introduction about your background as well. How would you describe yourself?
Yes, a man in his best years, having worked 20-something years professionally in software engineering, machine learning, and natural language processing. Started out as a computer science student, turned computational linguist in the 90s, and did my master's and my licentiate thesis. I'm not sure the English word is for that in Uppsala. Did my PhD in Gothenburg on active learning, actually, for named entity recognition. Some 12 or 13
We need to explore that one.
Yeah.
I mean, let's also uncouple that a bit for people that don't know what active learning or named entity recognition is. But in short, you can say it's some kind of computational linguistic, or how would you describe the field in general?
Yes, everything having to do with transforming or using human language, particularly written language, because, let's go back to that later on, but written language text by using computers, essentially. So there are nuances here as well. I was a language technology student, which is more applied than computational linguistics, which is perhaps more from the linguistic side, where you have your ideas and theories and you try to assess them or discard them by using computers.
And then if we go with named entity recognition to start with, how would you describe that?
Mentions in text of things and entities in the world, for instance, Anders Arpteg of Peltarion. There's a reference to you and to the company that you work with. So the ways that we can express those kinds of links in text are numerous. And they might be useful if you're building like a knowledge graph, for instance, to see how people or companies...
Don't go there, Henrik. I can see you're jumping into that one, but wait for that.
Yeah. So that's a way of getting to specific portions of information in text that you believe are important.
But you as well as me, have worked with NLP far before deep learning became popular and revolutionized, how we can work with text, and all these kind of traditional techniques like stemming or co-reference resolutions or whatever kind of technique you made use of. Do you think we know they're going away a bit, right?
Perhaps as techniques, but perhaps some of them are techniques that enable stuff that they will for sure go away, I would say. But in some respect, there are means to their own end, like named entities, for instance. If you want to see how many times Facebook were referenced by CEO or Zuckerberg or Facebook in a stream of news, you might still want to extract those entities.
Do you think named entity recognition will still keep on, so to speak?
Maybe, yes, I believe, but the techniques for getting at them will be different or are different.
Interesting topic. I'm biting my tongue a bit, but yeah, that's it sounds.
But that's
like
okay. So that's not what we're working with at RISE. I think we're more aligned with what you're thinking, like representation learning and doing semantic search and stuff like that.
But after university, where did we go? Where did you go from here?
I went to the Swedish Institute of Computer Science in pure Swedish, 6, where I worked for dozens of years, or 12 years, while I was doing my PhD. So working full time and doing the PhD at the same time is, end up taking some time. So that's what I did.
And you must have been a colleague with Lale, who has been on the podcast show earlier, guest.
Yes.
But you worked in different...
We were in different departments then, but then it's sort of we converge when we started at the same day. I believe in Recorded Future, which was then a small startup. I think he and I were number 8 or 9 on the.
So who was first?
I believe he was.
What year was this?
2010. Yeah. And then from what I've heard, they're like in the 400s of people now, and they sold the company last year for $750 million or something. Yeah.
And if you were to describe what Recorded Future does,
well, what we did back then, I think back then was different from what they're doing right now. Yeah. So they pivoted in a successful way, I would say. Back then we were working with essentially named entities and temporal referential expressions, like are we talking about today or tomorrow or last week, or when we say Q1 next year, what do we mean? And they did like a big database of this, so you could essentially query the database and like this, let me know about any rumored IPOs in Southeast Asia in Q2 next year, and they would have that information. But now they're working. That was about the time when I left them. But now, as far as I understand, they're working more with threats and threat intelligence.
Yeah, that's a big body for that, for sure. Yeah. And it's certainly needed these days. No question about that. But you also moved into Gavagai, right?
Yes.
And how did that happen? Can you just describe the history there a bit?
Yes, Magnus Sahlgren and Jussi Karlgren started the company Gavagai in 2008, and then they hired me and two of our former colleagues in 2010, I think. And from the start, it was like more of a technical company. We were building things that were based on Magnus and Jussi's research. It was actually embeddings before embeddings were cool, and it was so long ago. So MapReduce wasn't a thing back then. So we rolled our own thing,
so what did embeddings mean at that time? It wasn't word embeddings in terms of word to vec kind of style. No. It was something else. What was it?
It was based on the research on random indexing. So it's essentially count based. I'm sure I will hear from Mange about this later on, but a count-based method for actually getting embeddings from random seeds of words. And then you can get different types of relations there. You can get the paradigmatic relations, that is the substitution of things. So you could get synonymity and antonymity, words that mean the same. And you can also get the syntagmatic relations, like things that are following, and that we could use for different things.
And what was the main applications or use cases?
The first use case is quite different from what they or we are actually doing now, because I'm still a part of the company. The first one was social media monitoring. So my responsibility was to find data providers, get the data integrated into our system, and make sure we had a steady flow of tweets and blog posts and news and such. So I think at the peak we processed, I think, around 10 to 20 million social media posts per day.
And who was the typical customer, and for what purpose?
Well, mostly to keep track on like brands, if people are talking, because on this as well we built sentiment
analysis. I was thinking about that. Yeah.
So it turns out that sentiment analysis is not something you can actually act on. I mean, you can say you can see you have a timeline and you have your brand, and suddenly the negativity goes up. Well, why? What does it mean? So that's when we started working more with topics and so on. And this is where Gavagai is today is more like a, to put it simply, it's like an interactive topic model. So you could actually pour in your data if you're a company, and you could slice and dice the data and understand what people are talking about, if they're happy or not, or what kind of different sentiments there are if people are talking about your products.
So basically, you moved into more and more thinking what is actionable for the customer,
Yes,
and then basically sentiment is good, but we can do it better.
Yes, if you couple it with something else, it could be useful. So if you have topics and sentiment, and you have a timeline.
I need to connect you with someone.
Yeah.
We'll take that offline.
Good.
But you say topic modeling. Do you mean the classical type of unsupervised topic modeling? Or something else?
That's not really actionable, because there are too many knobs to tweak, and you can get it's more like, as far as I understand, it's more like a biased thing. I want to achieve this, and I turn my knobs until I get this. I might be misunderstanding something here, and that's not the way we're doing it at Gavagai. Gavagai's methods are based more on terms and term frequency, and one other thing that the system also learns is n-grams, like sequences of words that are prominent in the language. So it could pick up things like President Barack Obama or whatever precedent there is.
But can you, if you just elaborate a bit more, so if it's not unsupervised topic modeling, basically having a set of text and then trying to come up with a set of topics that are different in some way, clustering in some way.
Yes. It's a combination of topic modeling and clustering, I would say.
So your approach is more that you can actually specify some kind of topic that you want to have? So it's like more semi-supervised or purely supervised approach, or how would you describe it?
Well, I'm not really operational in the company, but I would describe it as it's like an exploration. You could have your data and you can explore.
So slice and dice kind of interactive.
Yes, exactly.
Functionality.
Yeah, exactly. And you can do it once, and then when you've done it, you have a model of your world, so to speak, and then you can do it over and over again. So next time, if you have 3,000 new emails from angry customers next week, you can apply the same model and you can see what has happened. And I think it's quite successful, actually.
Is it used together with sort of traditional MPS methodologies and CSI approaches?
So a CSI I'm not familiar with.
And yeah, old school MPS is ruling the world right now in this area. I mean, like it's Net Promoter Score.
Yes. So actually, I think they see quite a lot of NPS questions.
Yeah.
We just had a project recently about trying to have, if you take the traditional type of topic modeling, which is unsupervised, but usually based on TF, IDF, this kind of term frequency, statistical approaches, and then trying to move it a bit more to the semantical type of understanding that word embeddings, or especially these kind of BERT-based approaches today have. And we just have a semantical topic modeling project. What do you think about that? Do you think?
I think it's the way to go.
Yeah.
I'm curious how you manage to get the topics. I mean, in context, when you do things with BERT or any other transformer model, you have like the whole sequence encoded.
I'd love to talk about that in detail,
but before we go there, let's finish the first story of.
Thank you, Henry. Yeah, no, but it is not easy, but there are ways to do it.
But let's park that one. This is cool stuff.
Cool. Okay, so Gavagai, and you worked there, and they did a lot of very interesting stuff. And I know the company as well from before, and Magnus Sahlgren, who is your colleague, and still is today, I guess, in RISE, etc. How did you move from Gavagai? Was it into RISE directly?
No, I went to the Swedish Defense Research Agency first.
Right.
So what happened was, this was before BERT, because I remember that October morning by the coffee machine when the BERT paper was released, but this was prior to that. I realized I was working, I really loved it at Gavagai. It's a great place to be. My best years in work life so far has been there, in that place. But eventually I understood that we were building a product here. We went essentially from technology readiness level 1 or 2, which is academic research, to 8 or 9, which is a product. And having a product and making that journey from 1.2 to 8.9 it's challenging and it's cool. But when you are at 8.9, there are different priorities. I mean, you have to there's support, you have to have uptime, service level agreements, and everything like that. So, and I realized my field, I was working more or less like a software engineer back end, and also talking to clients and pre-sales and everything. It's a small company, everyone does everything. But I realized that something is happening to my field. The seismic shift of neural networks. I mean, they were applied once in the 80s and 90s, and they were quite uncool for some time. And
winter, then
yes,
back.
yeah, and spring. And I realized I want to be on that train, but to be that, I couldn't be at a product company. I had to switch. So
Back to research.
Yes. And then
can you just elaborate a bit more? Why couldn't you be at a product company?
Because product companies are busy doing product things. And I guess there are a couple of points. I have very few data points on this, but as far as I understand, I will not name names, but there are companies, you can pivot when you're young as a company, and you can make your tech selections then. But once you do it, it's going to be a lot of time and a lot of money before you can actually undo those changes.
But I think this is such an interesting. We should move into this topic later.
No, we know this is the whole pivoting and when to do it.
Yeah.
Actually, I want to elaborate on your level 1 to 9 product model. What are you referring to? Whose model? This is really good and cool stuff that people need to think about carefully. You clearly are doing it on a daily basis with this, but also how you think in RISE, that you work up to a certain level, but not the rest. This is a topic in its own that is super cool. So two good topics.
Yeah, I think let's unpack more.
Let's unpack
the question about companies that are more product related, like Spotify or Gavagai or whatnot. I think it's super important for them to be innovative, and it is hard for sure, but it's very important that they do that. And
I agree. And there's always an explanation. I mean, and in our case, I think it was the timing. So we built our own stack, and then to undo that, it would take time to adopt new technology.
Yep. Okay.
So many good stuff, topics.
Well,
can we add another hour?
I'm free tonight, so sure.
Okay, so Gavagai, but then you move into the Swedish Defense Agency, I guess we can call it. And can you just talk a bit about that, or is it all secret, or how much?
It's not really secret. It's a cool place. They do research for the purpose of keeping Sweden safe, in a sense. Different areas, and the particular area I was working in had to do with textual information. So I did one job where we looked at how people online in different forums like Flashback and such talked about journalists, in what way, if there were derogatory comments or hateful comments and such, and we quantify that in some way and put out a report to sort of shed light on that problem.
And to what purpose? I mean, why do you understand if they talked about journalists in some way?
Well, this particular project was actually commissioned by one of the organizations that sort of helps journalists, and it's also, of course, for democracy and being able to speak up and not be afraid. And one way of actually putting a light on it is to measure it, because then we can actually see if something are changing.
And I'm just curious, in what way is this organization placed in the defense ecosystem? I don't know what to call it.
It's a myndighet.
Okay, it's a myndighet.
Yeah, so it's a well, they do different kinds of research essentially.
But so they're not part of militären as such. It's actually a statlig myndighet.
It's a government agency.
Government agency.
Yeah.
Cool.
And then you worked there for some years?
No, 6 months. This is some having to do with expectation management. So I switched from Gavagai to do the research, and it turned out the projects I sort of faced there was not really the ones that I wanted to work with. So instead of hanging in there and trying to fix it, I figured I need to move on. So I was already moving on in a sense, since I was quitting after 7 years of one job. So great people.
Was it the lack of innovation, or was it lack of
wrong topics for you, I guess?
I think it was the context, and also without saying too much, I think the view of science was different.
Yeah. Okay.
So in this sense,
interesting. So that moved you into RISE, then, I guess.
Yes.
And for people that don't know what RISE is, how would you describe that?
RISE is Now we're quite a big place. I think we are 2,800 people in it. So it's essentially an organization comprised of all technical research institutes in Sweden. So we do pretty much everything. I found our logotype on plastic bags. I saw a big trailer with cars having our logotype on it. So we do everything from testing masks so they are safe for COVID to computer science.
Statens provningsanstalt is part of RISE as an example, just to highlight that you are really doing a lot of different things.
That's true.
But did you start at 6 first and then into RISE? Or
so 6 is actually morphed into RISE now.
Yeah. So this was at what year approximately?
Actually 2.5 years ago.
And then RISE restructured. Was it last 2 years ago?
Yeah, it's pretty much the same. From I actually went in there on
caused that
yes,
reconstruction.
my bad.
Okay.
So no, but I was employed under the new contract, and my colleagues had this old one still. So it was in the middle of the transition.
You were really starting in the transition period.
Yes. Yeah.
So everything up in the air, and then starting to structure it down.
Exactly.
Classic.
So there's a lot of opportunity to just do things, which is good.
And I worked a lot with SIX as well. And what does it stand for? Swedish Institute of Computer Science, or what's? Yeah. And that was then integrated into RISE, and they became a common unit, so to speak. Right.
Yeah.
So exactly where in RISE are you now?
Let's see if I remember the org chart. I think the division is called Digital Systems. And then the subdivision is called Computer Science, and in that is a group called Intelligent Systems, and there's our group called Natural Language Understanding, which is like an informal group.
And you call it natural language understanding instead of processing?
Yes.
Is that a point to that? Or
Yes.
Can you describe the differences?
No. Yeah. Well, it is in a sense. I mean, natural language processing is like a larger scope. You could do named entities, for instance, there, but the understanding part is more. Since this Magnus Sahlgren, who's leading the group, and he's also has a degree in philosophy, so he's really keen on the language philosophy thing and actually trying things out in models. So I think it's from there actually it stems. So it's more like representation learning and getting these magnificent models to do things that we barely believe are possible. So it's more about that, and then trying to use that, because since RISE is an applied research institute, we essentially have two interfaces towards our clients. One is research and one is innovation. And if you work in innovation, you take the things we do in research, in natural language understanding, and then you apply it to whatever information needs or use cases they have.
So when you say that this piece of RISE, you can actually commission RISE as a consultant like you would go to any other type of industry consultancy.
Yes. That's pretty much how we work. Everything is project based. So we who are researchers, we have our ideas, what we want to do. And I think we are 7 or 8 in our group right now, and we have our ideas, and we find peers that are having the same matching problems or research agendas, and then we work with them. Like Peltarin, for instance, we have lots of things in common, I think, given the projects we have.
And for people that still don't really understand, like RISE is a research institute by definition, but universities are as well moving, I would argue, at least towards more and more applied research in some way. If you were to try to still describe the differences between working as a researcher in your university compared to RISE, what would you say the difference is?
If you're in a university, maybe you have the opportunity to think more freely and, open spaces, think about, interesting stuff, and then you do things that is not really useful until someone else comes up with this other thing in 20 years, and then you can merge them and do something. RISE is more applied, so you don't have that horizon. Everything is guided by the needs. The purpose of RISE is to be some catalyst for Sweden in digitization and in AI and machine learning in our case. So we really have to have like a stakeholder that's willing to accept some things down the road, maybe 2 or 3 years ago. I mean, or way like the language model SweBert project, where we are building a language model for Swedish, and then try to deploy it to whoever wants to use it. That's a research project which has as goal to actually build something that we could be picked up by industry.
And I think we should have that as a separate topic about SweBert and speak a bit more about what we do there, because it's a big and very important
it's an important initiative.
But still, I'm really trying to think, how I should phrase this properly. I've been in universities as well after a PhD and worked as a researcher in university as well. And there are pros and cons, of course, in working, for one in industry completely and in academia completely, or in research institutes completely. I mean, there are pros and cons with each. How should I phrase this properly?
How do you see the pros and cons?
They should be
Thank you.
They should be complementary, I think, the pros and cons.
Well, okay, let me phrase it like this. There is one thing, what universities are today and how it works and how you have to apply for funding all the time to get the research grant you need to do the work you need. But in your view, what would be the best way to say that this is what the universities should do, this is the way RISE should do, this is the way industry should do research?
Wow, I don't know. I can't answer that. I mean, it's been so long since I was at the university. From what I see from within RISE, which is of course ridden with confirmation bias, is that we are doing the right thing. We have peers that are keen on what we're doing. We are constantly doing improvements or changes to what we actually do and what our research, to sort of accommodate. There's a push and pull. Like they say they want this, and we try to fix this, and we tell them you should look at this in this direction. So there's
a healthy dialogue.
Yes. I think so.
Bottom line, I mean, like you can stretch them, but then they can pull you back. This is what we need now. But you should think about this, and this is a constant dialogue.
And I think right now in our field, for an NLP and so on, there's a need for education. I mean, people or organizations need to be aware of what they should ask for and what they could do and what couldn't do.
The art of possible. They don't know.
No, exactly.
I think this is a great segue into potentially the next topic, and unless we have some other part of the career part that you're in. I mean, you're in RISE now, and you're working with NLP, and you're you're a senior research scientist, right? Yeah.
So the last question is, what are you working on right now? What's your daily job all about at RISE?
Oh, my daily job is to juggle meetings in Zoom, Teams, and Google Hangouts.
Welcome to the club, yeah.
Well, but there's a mixture of projects. I am heavy on the innovation project side, so I'm working with
together with clients.
Yes, exactly. So, and 2 of them are actually with agencies that are. If we translate this to English, it commence your AI journey. So they have received funding from Vinnova to start with small projects to get going. This first few steps on their
AI startup approach.
Yeah, exactly, and this is for there were actually 2 different calls. One of them were for commercial entities, and one is for public agencies. So this is for public agencies, and then there's two kinds of goals in each project. One is to do something for them with their data and their needs, and the other one is to help them get educated.
And typically, do you then, based on this Vinnova call, we have Daniel from Vinnova, so we have explained the call. But based on this call now, is this basically where, let's say, the public sector, an agency together with RISE is answering on the call and gets funding from Vinnova to work on a get started with AI project?
Exactly, and RISE is one part of it. It could be other actors as well doing it. So I work quite a lot with that, and we have some other agencies that we work with, and there's also new things coming in all the time. So lots with clients and.
Cool, and I know you can speak about specific details, but let's move into this topic, and you touched upon this a number of times, and speaking about product companies and innovation and things like that. Perhaps we can name the topic industrial versus academic research in some way.
That's interesting. Yes.
And if I just unpack it a bit and you give some context, we can see that especially in AI, it's been a rather strong trend in recent 5-10 years to see that, especially in China and US, that people have been moving and there's been like a brain drain from academia into industry. And the majority of research today in AI, at least, is coming from the tech giants. It's from the Google and the Facebook and the Amazons and the Microsofts and Apples of the world and Chinese companies and so forth. And we still have, of course, the universities, but they are, challenged by this big brain drain that is happening, and the big salaries that the big tech giants can give them, and industrial or academic universities cannot. So, for one, let me start with the question a bit. Would you agree with that the brain drain is happening, in especially US, I guess, and that is a problem?
I think it's happening. I'm not sure how many people are actually transitioning in full from academia to companies, or if they're just affiliated. What I've heard, I listen to podcasts. Not all of them are true. This one is, but what I've heard is that the big companies are actually claiming people. They pay them salaries to have their name on their roster, just to prevent
to boost their
and to prevent other companies from doing it. So they're like, I pay for your professorship or whatever. So there is a brain drain. I don't think it's good in the long run, because what they're doing is clearly not beneficial to society. If you look at Facebook and different,
that's a strong statement, though. Clearly not beneficial for society.
But is it? I mean, what's happening? Would we have had this crisis or even in a context like the pandemic, people are arguing whether things are true or not. Where there is, like, you have science and you can believe it, and they have their own facts. I mean, where does it come from?
Okay, let's have this topic later. Okay, what would happen with and without Facebook? I think that's an interesting topic.
But let's circle back to research, industry versus academic. How would you approach that topic? Let's start from. What's your fly-in to that topic? If you do the fly-in.
Not really sure. I mean, we as researchers most often want the society to benefit from our research, I guess. But then again, if you find yourself optimizing for algorithms for ranking for ads, for instance, and ad clicks, it might not be a good thing. On the other hand, it might be so that the work you're doing on this particular optimization problem actually helps something else, like drug discovery. You never know. So I think there has to be a healthy cooperation between academics and commercial entities.
Yeah, I mean, like, we've had the conversation before. I mean, like, the classic quote, who it is you can name, is academic research in AI at all useful, or is it a waste of space when we start, publishing papers to hit another metric of a test set?
But that's a bit different topic, because I think academia is doing it even more than industry, I would say, in that sense. It's Jeffrey Howard and the previous president of Kaggle and now founder of Fast AI, etc. But if we just think about research in industry versus academia, and we can say that at least a lot of brain drain is happening, and especially in AI, and we can see research is working in some way for big tech giants, but most other product companies, not so much. I mean, it's clearly to see that DeepMind and what Facebook is doing and others is rather, it's very basic research in some way, but it's not happening for a lot of other product companies. And for me personally, I think, innovation and research in companies is very important, and something that we in Europe and Sweden is lagging a bit behind in. Would you agree with that to start with?
Yes.
Yeah. So then the question is, what should we do? Should we try to improve the research in academia? I hope so. But I think, the bigger need perhaps is to improve the research in industry. Would you agree?
I think there has to be an exchange of I mean, there should be the same people in academia and commercial entities.
Well, the same people.
Collaborative.
You go back and forth. I mean, you shouldn't be in the same company, or you shouldn't be in academia only forever. So maybe you had to have different views. I mean, we are only so many people doing this, and in 10 years' time there will be something else in AI that's more pressing. I don't know, gene editing or whatever. So I think there has to be an exchange of experience between research and academia, commercial research and academic research. And I think one of the things that is differing is the focus and the definition of done. So what you deliver in a company is something else. It's usually something that is going on over time. You have to repeat. I mean, you don't really have a happy customer until the second invoice is paid. I mean, they have to be repeated and stuff like that. And that you're freed from doing that in academic research because you do it once.
But don't you think you can do that in industry though? Still?
Yeah, maybe. But I mean, okay. So let's have it at the focus of industry because you have something that you work for.
It's a domain. It's a fundamental problem that is relevant for your P&L.
Yeah.
And I guess it moved back to one of the topics you said before, what's the difference between science and engineering in some way? And can you do science in industry? Obviously, you can do science in academia, no question about that. Then you can ask, I guess, can you do engineering in academia? It's a bit harder, perhaps. But still, do you have a favorite definition of what is science, what is engineering?
Science is what I do, and engineering is what people have to do to make my science work. Maybe. I don't know. That's arrogant. But I mean, the reason I brought up this distinction is because I don't like it.
You don't like the distinction?
No, because people say, well, we are doing science, we're not doing engineering. Yeah. But what would your science be without engineering? I mean, if you look at GPT-3, which is a very large language model, which, well, it's only engineering to make that work because it has to be sharded across multiple machines. It has to be
like thousands.
Yeah, like thousands, and the inference. People. That's from my point of view as a scientist, that's engineering. But if you're an engineer working with it, there's no clear cut.
Do you think engineering can be science in itself?
Yes, I think so.
But I think this is also an interesting topic. Isn't this actually needing to be symbiotic?
Yes.
We had on the micro level, what is the difference with a data scientist leaning on towards advanced analytics and an ML or AI engineer? And we started to understand, well, someone needs to do the fundamental scientific approach to fix and validate the correct model. Then you need to deploy the model.
Exactly.
And respectfully, it's different competences here. This is almost software engineering competence, and this is actually more mathematical, scientific method.
But I think there is a purpose to have these kind of different terms, the science and engineering, and I think there is a distinction. I have a favorite definition of this. Do you have one, Henrik? Or?
No, I think this is the symbiotic topic is my idea, and I think they're clearly different. But let's go for your definition.
Do you have a favorite one? Or?
I have one thing, the agenda. So as a scientist, you have an agenda. You want something, you pursue your curiosity to find something out. Maybe as an engineer, you are fine with following someone else's agenda. You want to make his or her things work.
But actually, the fundamental goal of your task and your metric is different. If I take the data scientist, can you optimize and validate what is the optimal model for this? Where the engineer will be, how do I code that model in the most beautiful, efficient way to deploy it?
Yeah.
But I'm not really here to do the core modeling. That is someone else's job.
Yeah.
So for me, this is distinctly two different goals.
Oh, that's true. That's true. So let's hear your definition.
Yeah, I like short and very concise.
Yeah, this is not. That's not me. But sorry.
But there's clearly an overlap, no question about that. But I think the one big difference is the purpose.
Yeah.
So the purpose for science is to build knowledge, the learning aspect, the building knowledge purpose. Engineering has the clear purpose of building some product. But to build a product, you need knowledge. And to build knowledge, you need products. So there is an overlap. But the big distinction, I would argue, is the purpose.
But could we substitute product for system? Then I would be fine, because it's not always product. I mean, if you look at
but the product can be a system, I guess.
But this is knowledge. This is the optimum model. But how do I put that in operation or production product? But system is another way of putting something into use. Maybe the engineer puts stuff to use. You hook is product because there's different ways of defining. So, but I kind of like the idea.
Yeah.
I like the definition of it.
And I think the things we're talking about, engineers and science, are long established terms. But now we're looking at MLOps, AIOps, DevOps.
Exactly like
and
this, right?
These are terms or job titles that didn't exist 4 or 5 years ago. So I'm reading a book. I don't remember the name exactly. It's something with design patterns for machine learning. There's actually a book on it. Says, well, here's the different roles, and there's a nice graph of that. And it says that if you're a scientist, this book is not for you. So it's actually how do you do feature engineering? How do you do rolling deployment? How do you do? So I think there are 30 recipes on. It's a Google book.
But it's an engineering book.
More or less, yeah. Me as a more or less scientist, I really enjoy reading it and see. Okay, so this is what you can do. This is how you can represent,
And this topic, of course, we can do this in a philosophical way, but it is actually a huge topic if you go to a large traditional enterprise that are trying to recruit and balance a team and try to understand what they really need to hire. Because ultimately, if you hire the data scientist, he's here to figure out which model is the optimum model and validate and have that reliable and all that. And maybe they need one of those guys, but they kind of need more engineers or something like that, and they don't really understand the distinction of this. So I think this is quite important when you start thinking about going this journey and scaling this and operationalizing AI to understand the difference.
So what if we try to close this topic a bit, but what's the utopian kind of future where we have industrial and I hope academic research working in harmony in some way? Where do you see the biggest investments that we need to do if you were to speak to some politician, for example, and say, we need to fix this to make Swedish research in general work better?
Well, I think, how should I put this? Someone dropped the ball in the government, looking at how WASP, the Wallenberg Foundation, is actually funding the biggest leap into AI in Sweden. It's a private entity. It's not the government. Yeah. So I think they dropped it. Someone should pay for academics to do academic research and be aware of that it has to be free and it has to be allowed to cost money. Right. Of course, they have to balance it for everything else that people want.
Yeah, I think that's really well put, I think. And of course, we want research in industry, but it's going to be a bit more biased in industry because it has a clear purpose of serving the business model that the industry has.
Yeah, and the business, they're there for their shareholders in order to make money.
Yeah,
to put it bluntly.
And that's okay in many senses. And I think research in industry in that way can be really, really useful. And we've seen that in Google and Facebook and in China, even Chinese companies, I would argue. Yes. But I think there is a big need for academic research as well, especially being not dependent on the business values that otherwise are there. Right?
You could put it like this: academic research wouldn't have come this far unless there had been like the commercial entities as well. I mean, BERT, for instance, and all the transformer things. And
exactly. Yeah, I mean, I think it's a bit unfortunate that actually what's driving research in AI, at least, is the industrial aspect of it, not really the academic. I know people would argue me on that, but I actually think it's true. Yeah, right.
Yeah, I agree. But I see it's like a leapfrogging. So maybe academics will take over, whatever that means.
But they had now the industry leapfrogged, and now. Gearing up, and then we hope the academia will take the next leapfrog.
Exactly.
Push each other.
Much like data and algorithms. I mean, algorithms were the cool things, were the secret things, and now everything is open because the people releasing the algorithms know that the data is not there for other people to actually monetize on the models. So
cool. Let's take another topic here, and I'm eager to jump to one of the statements you made that Facebook is hurtful in many ways.
Yes.
But let's try to keep it a bit short, I think, because I would like to move it to SweBert as well and speak a bit longer about that. But
and he did a segue to data, but we didn't pick up on that.
I tried. I have it in my list.
I know. No worries. I felt it.
No worries. Okay, so you said something about Facebook and. What was your Okay, can you just repeat? What are your thinking about Facebook and how that has impacted research or society?
No, but it's Facebook as a proxy for social media.
Okay, social media in general.
In general, and I think there are good things obviously, and there are bad things. And I think what we see in the news and what we experience might be the bad things. And this is the polarization between people and the filterbubblan, exactly. Yeah. And the things that we don't understand. Yeah, I mean, we are in our bubbles and we don't understand the people outside the bubble, and that's a problem. And we're not really humble about it. And I think
can we just go down in this topic, because not everybody might have heard and understood what we know with the filter bubble and how we all get our individual truth right now on social media. Could you just elaborate on, because this is my concern.
So like the canonical example is not an example, but see, you have algorithms prioritizing the things you see on Facebook. So or even a search engine. So if I search for something given my history, and you search for something, we will see different things.
Yes.
And the fact that we see different things are enforced or reinforced by us moving along in this virtual world and interacting with the people we are interacting with. And then we come to believe perhaps that
everybody else likes mountain biking as well.
Exactly. This is the world, and then you encounter someone who's outside this and believes that the Earth is flat.
Yeah.
Oh, this is weird. They must be stupid. And
by the way, the flat earthers, all they see are articles stating that the Earth is flat.
Exactly.
And that movement is expanding very rapidly recently.
Yeah. And it wouldn't have worked. I mean, like the filter bubbler and flat earthers is some sort of correlation in this.
Okay, so of course, social media, if I were to make some kind of statement here, it was a big revolution and changed really the way we communicate and how we interact with people in so many ways. And I'm sure it's a lot of barnsjukdomar.
Yes.
What are you saying? Like some initial problems with the way we implemented that. And the filter bubble is for sure one.
I think this is bigger. We didn't understand how huge this is and how we unleashed these algorithms. No one could have planned or expected this. There wasn't a planned filter bubble.
No, I don't think people were meaning bad things when they did it. They just
yes. So okay, let's take let's say YouTube or something, and let's say that I search for dancing or a book or something, and I get my nice list of how to do proper dancing and how not to do it. And since I clicked a number of things in the past, I probably get similar things when I search for that. And if you like different type of dancing, you probably get different lists. The question then is, what is the solution? I mean, of course, still we can say that in general, having these type of recommender systems, which they have, is a big benefit in general. It's just that they have perhaps some bugs or problems with the way they're implemented. Would you think that the solution if we just crystallize it into, should we simply shut down recommender engine, or should we try to change how they work to avoid these kind of problems? What do you think the solution is?
I'm not sure about the solution, but I think the optimization, what they're optimizing for, is different. I mean, they're optimizing perhaps for engagement on the platform to be able to show ads, targeted ads, and then earn money. So maybe the optimization goal has to be something different for this to be beneficial for society instead. So that's
you say ads. Okay, so do you think ads in general is always hurtful?
No.
Do you think there is a way in the future that ads can actually be beneficial for users in some way?
Yes, I mean, I sometimes click ads because they look interesting and I find new stuff.
Yeah.
I mean,
I think this is quite profound, right? What are these algorithms optimized for?
Yes,
and ultimately they are optimized for a couple of things. They're clearly optimized for maximizing the time you stay online, because the longer you stay online, the more ad revenue you can get from it and all that. So all of a sudden now, if you with that metric, it realizes that, well, I should give him two types of messages. Things that gets him really upset, he will click on that. What the fuck is this shit? Or things he really love. and then we are feeding the bubble. So here's an interesting one. Do we need to steer on these metrics we're optimizing on? Because I think that's part of the problem here. That it's this is AI for greed, right? That is then taking this good service too far, simply because it's almost addictive, right? How they drive our social behavior to click on it and click on it and click on it. So so I think this is quite one topic.
There was a couple of years ago, I think the last election in the US, not the previous one, that just what it was, but the one before, they had some of the bigger news outlets had this red feed, blue feed, side by side Facebook feed based on whether you were Republican or Democrat. And you could search for things like Hillary Clinton and you would see completely different things.
Interesting.
So it was really eye-opening. And I think we shouldn't look for solutions too quickly. We should try and stay in problem space and see why is it that we are seeing, is this a problem? I claim it's a problem. Could we quantify that in some way and actually make sure, maybe it's not a problem, but maybe it's just because a few people think it is. Maybe it's something else. Maybe it's not the reason that we had Donald Trump as the president in the US, for instance.
For one, I agree that it is a problem, no question about that, and it's been a lot of issues with how the big social media companies are using recommender systems. But then the question is really, what can we do? One thing we cannot do is to say, let's turn off all the social medias. It's not going to happen.
I don't think that's an option either.
No. So the question then, I know that some companies like YouTube and I know Spotify and others are thinking about, can we in that way make recommendations more diversified?
Yes.
Can you simply say that if you take news articles, for example, and recommender systems for news, I know, for example, some companies, without saying names, are working with saying, okay, you search for news about Hillary Clinton. Then they're going to deliberately have KPIs, metrics that are optimized for, that says these are positive and these are negative aspects of that specific term. Like sentiment analysis kind of measures for that, to try to say, let's always aim to have a diversified set of recommendations when you search for terms.
I think you're better in framing what I was trying to get to. It's the fundamental metric that might be the problem, and if we want to deal with these problems, we might need to deal with how we are defining the metric that we are, like you did now.
Yeah.
I think that's actually
I think there are. I know people are working with it. I don't think we have the solution today. I know most social medias are not doing this right now, but I think there are ways to do it.
And even this could be regulated even to some point.
Sure. I also think it's a matter of non-technical solutions. Look at the kids today. They in school pretty early. They have courses on how to be, think for themselves and question news items. And if you look at different studies I've seen, the people, the age segment that are most prone to fall for these kind of things, they are the older people, like my parents and that generation. So I think this might be a passing thing.
But this is also a really good angle. I have my 12-year-old, he has his book reading in Svenska, and what is he reading? Critical thinking on internet.
Yes.
Really?
Yes.
12 years old.
Yeah,
I got blown away.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, that's awesome.
This was internet trolling and how to act. So he was so they were using books to educate them on internet behavior, and I think that's part of the solution.
Yes.
That we are more critically, how do we get away from this fake news, right? If we're all critical around it and we start looking at sources in a different way, and I think the generation like 12 years old. It's pretty cool.
Exactly. So there's a multifaceted angle to a problem like this.
Absolutely. That's a good ending on that one, I think.
Awesome.
We need to talk about NLP and we need to talk about data, guys. And time flies. So at least those two. We promised that as key themes.
Let's move into NLP then. And perhaps we should move into the SweBert project. And that's an interesting one. And SweBert formally is the Swedish language model for Swedish authorities project. It's a big one where RISE is involved and Paltarian and a number of Swedish authorities, like the tax authority and the employment agency. And
so I asked a stupid question. What is SweBert?
Perhaps you like to give your description.
Okay. So there is this neural architecture, a model for learning things called a transformer. That sort of morphed into something a bit different called BERT, which I think the name BERT is from Sesame Street, and it was because the best model before that was Elmo. So now they call it Muppetware. Anyway, so
I've heard that actually.
That's so good.
That's really funny.
So and
Google, right?
Yeah, Google did this, and
too much fun at work.
That's where I had to
exactly.
write it.
And they, from what I heard, this is actually more of an engineering effort than a science effort. That's the rumor about BERT. Anyways, it's for English originally, but we perhaps need to do this in Swedish for Swedish. For the Swedish society, and it requires some power in terms of computation and in terms of data and such. So perhaps I think the idea was that maybe no one singular commercial entity should do this, but maybe like the state should sponsor this, and we had a consortium with RISE and Peltarian and others to actually build models like this, and a key player in this is Kungliga Biblioteket, the Swedish National Library, because they have all the data.
A lot of data.
So
all the data, but a lot of data.
But so there's
the most Swedish data, I think.
Yes.
But there's
Yes.
for the uninitiated, there is a lot of unpacking here. We're talking about transformers. We're talking about language models. We're talking about using transformers to create BERT, which is a language model. And now ultimately the context is: can we use this technology and these open source frameworks and make a Swedish language model for general purpose?
Yes.
I would rephrase it as: can we make this language model work for Swedish as good as possible?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, I know where you're going with this.
I don't. Now this was good because I don't understand the difference what you said to what I said, but there is a distinction.
I think we can move into this topic. So the topic then would be monolingual versus multilingual models.
That's a nice segue.
Cool.
But before we go there,
this is all NLP, but different facets. I love it.
Yeah.
Okay. No, but I think I really like this project in general. It's a 3-year project. It's financed by Vinnova and then in kind from the companies and partners that are part of it. And I also like actually that the public sector is so heavily involved. And I also must give some praise to the agencies that we do have in Sweden that are surprisingly innovative, I must say, and are able to work with the latest type of AI in ways that is a bit surprising to me, actually, and it's really in a positive way. So I'm really happy for that. But then still, of course, we want to make sure that the Swedish industry in general is able to use AI for Swedish text. I mean, that's a general goal, right? And then we have a number of... should we move into the contrastive tension as an example, perhaps? Or do you think that's a good topic? So we have a number of results already from this project. We're, I guess, 1.5 years into the project or something, less than halfway, but we already have some really cool results. If you were to speak about the contrastive tension, how would you describe that work?
Awesome. No,
that's a good way.
It's my colleagues. I wasn't really involved in it, other than talking and reading drafts of the paper. It's basically an idea by which you could train a language model to represent text in a way that you could measure for quantify the semantic similarity. That is the content of the text, the meaning of the text, in a sense. So you can have two meanings that are phrased differently. That has different words in different order, but they mean essentially the same, and you can compare them by using this model. There are many different models by which you can do this, but this in particular is trained in something called an unsupervised way. So it means that you don't have to have like an answer key or annotations to do this.
From hell. Yeah.
No, exactly. So this is something that Fredrik Olsson at RISE came up with past summer, and together the team, and this is why I love to work at RISE so much, because the team that I'm working with is really good at picking up these things. Someone has an idea and they started bounce it off the walls, and then they come, do something with it. And one natural outlet for this particular idea was to write a paper, a scientific paper. And I saw in Slack today that they were actually working on the formatting of the camera-ready copy for the conference.
So it was accepted for one of the biggest AI conferences, iClear, right?
Yes.
And that's a really big thing.
Yeah.
So
This is huge, right?
Yeah, it's huge. I played around with it. I mean, that's also one thing that's really cool now. It's the path from research to actually using the research has never been shorter. So Fredrik did this, trained some models, uploaded them to GitHub with the example code, and you can download them from Hugging Face, which is one of the frameworks that you can use, and then I could play around with it at home. So it's really cool that way. But yeah.
But could we decompose a little bit like this? Because I sense or understand that transformers has really revolutionized machine learning space, and 80-90% of who is doing advanced analytics is not on the train in Sweden.
Say advanced analytics.
No, I mean like we do AI, so you do machine learning, yes. And what do you do in machine learning? Well, not transformers, not even maybe not hardly even. So Luca would say traditional AI or advanced, So
analytics is different from AI, I would say.
Yeah, but okay. Let's simply be in the machine learning space, and then what is now the difference with transformers, and how does this relate into BERT? And then I think you could start unpacking it deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper. But you're starting so far ahead. Where 90% don't even understand transformers.
So we could start by looking at the data and say that when you represent the data in the good old days, scikit-learn way, you did it by, and this is text and it's representation learning. You did it by counting words, and there's a scheme for weighting terms called TF-IDF. So term frequency, inverse document frequency. That's one way of doing it. It's very simple. It's still very competitive in certain tasks, which is worrisome because we want to do the cool stuff, right?
It is annoying.
Yeah, it's annoying when the old model is outperforming the cool stuff.
Really diminishing returns some way to use different things. But what it ends up with, that you have like if you have a text encoded using bag of words, which is called, you have a set of words and you have the weights on it, you get a long vector for that text. This can do a lot of things, but it can't do things like synonymity and antonymity and semantic relations on the word level. So, and this is the next step, was the word-to-vec things. Was it 2014 or what?
13, I think.
13, yeah. In that way, you could compute based on the context of the word. That is how the word is actually used in text. You could say something about its meaning, and I think the main idea is that if two words are used in a similar context, in similar sense, they mean pretty much the same thing or similar things.
Yeah. So instead of having a statistical kind of approach of counting term frequencies, you had a small neural network with a single hidden layer.
Yes.
So try to use the
So now we're going into neural networks at least.
Yes.
This is the first breakthrough with neural networks in this space.
So first, but it's one of the big ones.
The big ones. Okay.
One of them. It's quite cheap to use, and there are variants of this, GLAV and fast text and word-to-vec.
And are they still useful in some cases?
Yes, in some cases I would argue they are, because what they can do is actually see things in context. In one way, you can have, if you have one type or one token, that is one expression on the surface text. Like, can't come up with an example. Bank.
Paris Hilton, the city.
Yeah, Paris Hilton. Yeah, and she was conceived there, right? No, Paris Hilton.
Yeah. So, can you distinguish between a person and a city?
Oh no, you can't. You can't really do it. If you have like orange and orange, you have the fruit and the telecom company. What is it with telecom companies and bad naming? By the way,
Apple.
Apple.
But Apple. If you talk about Apple on the interwebs, it's usually in plural. You have to say apples. So that's not too big a problem. That's something I learned at Gavagai. Anyways, so you have the word thing. You can actually say something about the words in the sense that if you have a representation of a text based on word-to-vec, you could say that two texts, one having Paris Hilton and one saying something about Continental.
City of Paris.
City of Paris or Paris Hilton and Continental something. You could say that Paris Hilton is one hotel and the other Continental is one hotel. So they're quite similar, despite not sharing any lexical features. So that's one thing. But then came Transformer and BERT. And Transformer is like we had this sequential networks before, but this is one way of encoding data in a way that you can actually have long-term dependencies. So if you have Paris Hilton, the name of a person, and Paris Hilton, the name of a hotel, you would have different representations for those particular things. And this is what these contextualized language models are actually doing.
And here I learned now we talk about attention is all you need.
Yes, exactly.
So explain attention in this context.
And attention in this context is a way of, well, to explain attention, I would say that you have to go back to look at how you did it with recurrent neural networks before. So you had the recurrence, that is, you have like a sequence of things, and then you could remember from previous sequences or previous states in the sequence something. But one of the problems there is that this memory sort of diminishes as you go along. So with the attention, you didn't encode it as a sequence. You instead encoded things, put it bluntly, as if I'm a word in a sentence, I have attention on certain other positions, because this is what means something to me. And these attention masks are also learned from the data. Perhaps
so it's something about the words in a context and the attention of what has been in the sentence before. It means that the logic should be around this.
Yes.
Something like that.
So and these are, if you think of it in ways that you can actually imagine, these are too small. I mean, these are so big, the networks, and there are so many parameters. It's like functions that have billions of parameters that you could tweak.
So MT5 is the new one.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, in short, it's a big revolution.
And now go nerdy. Now we have introduced the topic to go. Now I want to go to the next level. Go.
Yes. And
now we go to the next level.
Transformers is not only single language, it's multilingual also, and it's also multimodal. That is, you're not only able to crack the language code, but also images.
Yeah, so what's the cool thing with MT5 to what it was done before? What is MT5?
So
sorry, I'm stealing it. You go now. Sorry, I don't know shit.
Blame yourself. I'm going to speak far too much about this now. But
please.
But Transformers, of course, from 2017 started as a translation model, and then BERT came and a general classification and regression type of network that was really revolutionized in so many ways, and being able to use in pre-training, which was a big thing with BERT. And that has really also changed, that you don't need as much annotated data, which this contrastive tension paper is also really much about. And I think, the normal kind of the thing that we spoke about before, which is what is really the biggest use for AI in industry, or for when you really use it in practice, is that, annotating data is really hard. It's easy in academia because you just use academic data sets, but in reality, you don't have that. You don't have annotations, but you have data in some way. Even PDFs, even though it's hard.
PDF. Dirty text.
Dirty data. So the question is then really, how can you minimize the amount of annotated data? And I think BERT made a big revolution when it comes to that.
Because you have practicality now. It's not just a groomed text set, but it's actually real dirty data, and it can sort of sort it out.
And then the T5 paper came out like a year ago, and it actually went back from BERT to the original transformer and generates text, and it seems to actually be a way to just improve performance even more, which is kind of surprising. And then this multilingual approach came a couple of months ago.
Emmet is multilingual T5.
So training on 100 languages at once in a single model, moving it to a more generic model, seems to work surprisingly well. So you can even use something that's trained to do some task like sentiment analysis or question answering or some kind of text classification in English, and then directly apply it to Swedish without training for any Swedish annotated data at all.
And how does that concretely work? What is happening under the hood?
Oof. I don't know.
It's really hard.
It's magic.
It's magic, and
it is. It's that cool, isn't it?
It's really cool, and I think maybe it's not the MT5 paper, but maybe was it XLNet or XLMR?
XLMR,
where they showed
paper,
where they show that when you have small languages like Swedish, not much data, are actually beneficial or benefited from this multilingual setting, because you could piggyback off the English data, for instance. Because
it really sounds crazy that you don't really need any text, and it can sort of
Sorry,
chips man. But I mean, like with MT5, how you can pick it up and it can kind of on the fly translate.
I mean, let's move into this topic about monolingual. I think we're still into SweBert land here, and we want basically to maximize the ability to use AI for Swedish text. That's the end goal in some way. Yeah. And one way to go there is monolingual models, and we've done a lot of really amazing work with that, like contrastive
So BERT is a monolingual model.
There are both multi and monolingual versions of BERT, I would say. But in SweBert, we have done mainly, I would say, monolingual versions of language models so far. And one of them is the contrastive tension, and another is the KB BERT and Arbetsförmedlingen, the AF BERT.
So KB must be Kungliga Biblioteket BERT.
Exactly. Yes. And it's really awesome because it really, puts state-of-the-art results when it comes to doing some kind of text classification task or something for Swedish text.
So we even got an internal who can do the best Swedish model, I guess.
There's always a competition.
Always a competition.
So then it comes, and here's a question to you as well. The pros and cons of monolingual versus multilingual. And obviously we can say that it's probably easier to train a monolingual model to beat state-of-the-art result for some specific task and specific language, right? If you train it a lot of Swedish data, you get a lot of high performance there. So then it comes back to, I'm not sure if you heard about Jeffrey Howard's comment.
No.
So he was the president of Kaggle before, and now he's the founder of FastAI. And someone asked him, I think it was Lex Friedman in one podcast, saying, "What do you think about the research being done in deep learning these days?" And he said, "I think." The majority of research being done in deep learning is a complete waste of time.
But you have to say that in Australian accent, right?
Yes, exactly. And what he meant is basically, we can see all the big tech giants especially, and some universities are competing, and even Swedish people in SweBert are competing, saying we can get 0.5 percentage point higher
on this
some kind of task.
On this sample text.
But they don't really consider the practicalities of using it in that way. It still requires you to annotate a lot of data if you want to use models like this.
Well, this is what happens if you have a metric as a goal and then you start optimizing for that metric.
Exactly.
It's useless.
That's back to this topic.
Back to this, social media kind of thing.
Yes.
But it's also then the industry and science, what's the metric, how we want to steer our research could be an interesting angle on this. But let's not go there. Continue.
I think we should try to end the SweBert topic here. I think it's really awesome that we actually do have these kind of initiatives in Sweden, and we're able to collaborate with RISE in these kind of ways.
But do you see? Can you take the next step with SweBert by going into MT5, explore? In a way, start over, but with a multilingual model.
I mean, SweBert is one thing. I think we are using actually different kinds of architectures. So BERT is one, and then there are many others as well. So might be more. Useful for the kind of language that we're using. But going back to the multilingual thing, maybe we should just bring in all the Nordic languages that are pretty similar and just get more data and get more leverage, perhaps in particular for the smaller Nordic languages.
Exactly. I like it. And perhaps as a final point there, and just moving a bit more.
You need to go deeper, guys. You promised me, guys. Don't interrupt me, Henrik. I'm going to go deep now on NLP. Let's go, man. Let's go. I don't mind.
But NLP, I would say like this. I started my basic training was I graduated in 97, 98. And in those days, no one actually cared what we did. Oh. It was like, what? And now people are starting to care, and now it matters what we're doing, and with this interest, there are a host of other things coming as well, like transparency, fairness, and all the things, all the explainability, and all the tricky things that we as engineers and scientists are like, oh, this is awkward. But it's a sign that society and people are ready.
Wants to make it robust.
Yes, and ready to accept what we can offer.
So now they're asking the tricky questions to really start using it.
Exactly. So NLP is not just about models and scoring. It's also, I would say, predominantly about using things and actually get acceptance.
But if you think about it, the usability is endless.
Yeah.
I so many use cases in so many different
Well, we are at that. Did we had like any discussion about like the usability of NLP in industry or any type?
Let's go there now.
Yeah, because I think
let's
it's
go
a
there
good way to finish it. It's great to talk about like what it is, but how can companies actually use it, or even people or startups.
So what is the use? I mean, like I use claim the usability should be endless for NLP type driven processes,
Yes.
or really rethink a whole process if you can use the normal text.
Yeah, I can only answer from the point of view of an applied research facility, and I think Anders is more equipped to answer
You have
since you have this. You're at a different position, and you're perhaps meeting clients that are more technically adept and know what they're asking for. Our clients are usually, they have to be educated to a certain degree, and so that's what we do, and that's what we can do because we're a government-owned research facility. But let's hear it from you. What's
No, but I mean, in short, I think if you compare all the different modalities, as you call it, different types of data that you do have, it can be text, it can be images, it can be audio, it can be time series, it can be tabular data or numbers simply, and just thinking about what is the most common type of data format that companies have. I would argue, and what we've heard is that text is the clearly predominant type of data that companies have. And if we can make use of that in a better way and actually start to understand the meaning of it, the applications of it are immense and more than the other types of data modalities that we do have. Saying that, though, I'm not sure, and just because you said it, we want to go really deep and thinking.
One topic. Pick one.
And I'm not sure. Sorry, Fredrik, for just bringing this on you quickly, but it was a paper coming out from Facebook, I think, just a week or two ago. It was called a Unified Transformer.
I haven't read that.
But in short, they want to do a multimodal and multitask kind of transformer.
That's cool.
So I really, like the general direction of the research moving into more generic models. That it's not made for a specific task, not just made for sentiment analysis, not just made for question answering, not just made for text classification in some way, but done for many tasks at once, and you can apply it for whatever you want.
It sounds like GPT-3.
No.
This is more.
I was just.
He likes to.
I'm just teasing you.
The thing with this one, it actually is not only for multitask, it's also for multimodalities.
Yeah.
So then that means that it can handle both text and images in this case. So this is from Facebook, and it came out recently, and they have a shared set of parameters, which is transformer based, with an encoder depending on what type of modality it is. So the image has a different encoder than the text, but still they have a common decoder. And basically, in short, you can say it's a shared model, a single model that can be used for different tasks and different modalities and combined into one.
So this is truly, now we get into multi-purpose tools.
Yeah, generic AI.
A generic AI.
We're moving towards AGI in some way.
So generic. So this is a generic little thingy that can apply to solve different type of problems, but it can be both language problems and image.
And I think the natural idea is to use different modalities to learn. I mean, as humans clearly don't use or learn language. My kids didn't learn language by reading. So there's much more at play, like pointing and feedback and whatever. So bringing text and bringing images and sounds and sensor data and whatnot. I think that's the way to do it.
So what you're highlighting in its small microcosmos, this is going general.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's going in the right direction. It's so much more applicable. The practicality of using these more generic models is very high.
So if I understand it right, instead of having multiple different models for many different things, you can have fewer models that can then handle more use cases.
You train it on the whatever data you have, you want to apply it for your specific use case, and then you don't have to retrain it for that. You can train it on another task, and it still works and learns how to do it. It's like multilingual.
Yeah.
But for multitask and multimodal. So imagine multilingual, multimodal, multitask, everything in once.
All human communication in one model.
At some point in time, it will be a human brain, a generic human level of intelligence. And this is very, very far away, but it's moving in that direction, and I like it.
And so this was a paper the other week from Facebook.
Yeah.
And do we know why they are working on this particular problem? What are they planning to use it for? How does it fit into their usage? Or is it actually general research?
This is probably more base research, yes. But the applications, I think, is obvious for Facebook, since they have images and text all the time. So I mean,
so they have one model to sort. Then they can simplify the whole infrastructure. They can simplify the infrastructure.
Yeah, and they have not only that. I think they have a moderation problem as well. Images and texts and things that are not good and shouldn't be there. And this is sort of brings to mind one of the things at the beginning of the pandemic. There were reports about the moderation systems and algorithms breaking down at YouTube, Facebook, and Google, because the people working with in concert with the moderation algorithms, they had to go home because of the pandemic, and they were not really designed, the algorithms, to work by their own.
And what is moderation?
Moderation, I would say, is to keep track of bad content on the platform.
So moderator in svenska.
Yes.
So moderator.
Yeah. Handle abuse, basically, in different ways.
Awesome.
I think we should move to another topic as well. And you started speaking a bit about the way we do education today in universities, and then you do something when you start working. And there is would you say there is a disconnect today in that? Or?
Well, it's been some time since I had the opportunity to attend the university, quite 2 decades. But from what I understand, there's a misalignment between what new students, junior people coming out of university believe they will be working with when they come to a company. And well, it's like every business thing. It's a matter of managing expectations. Yeah. So in this sense, if you are trained as a data scientist and you have to parse XML or PDFs, for God's sake, instead of doing cool modeling.
You really hate PDFs. That's interesting. Yeah.
Well, sometimes I read PDFs. It's a good medium for that. But still, so I mean, there's
So people start coming out from university now, and they are actually studying machine learning. But the reality is that 90% of companies still works in Excel and Power BI or whatever.
And I think this is not only a case for machine learning. I think it's a case for software engineering in general. Maybe things has gotten better in the past couple of years or 20 years or so. But when I studied computer science, we did some things. And when I came to work for companies, the process of working was something that we hadn't touched upon, like project management or working in agile environments and doing things. And the definition of done, again, it's the second time I mentioned it, but knowing when you're done and move on, and realizing the value you have, and doing that on the scale. And I think this might also go back to the fact that academics and academic research is concerned with things with a certain point in time. They're not really concerned with doing this over and over for a period of time. Be it like developing or deploying a model for text classification, or doing software development. So there's a disconnect, I would say, and I'm not sure who should have the responsibility to make this alignment, or if it's even a problem. I'm not sure.
Do you think AI education is different from other type of education, like normal software engineering education?
Yes, maybe, because it's moving so fast. So I think it's a choice that the people educating has to make, is whether to do the fundamentals, which hasn't changed that much, or do something about the state of the art.
And also, I think AI, one of the things we're trying to promote a bit in the Swedish AI agenda and others is that we want AI understanding, which is different from being able to develop AI and use AI. So having an understanding is something, and I hope you agree, that we should try to bring into any kind of sector, right?
It's expectation management again, I would say.
So how should that happen? And if we think about education, we have universities and we have this kind of crammed, educational programs today where you spend 2, 3, 5, 10 years, and if you do PhD or whatnot in learning something, and then you just jump into industry and start working, and then it's a big disconnect, as you say. What do you think the solution should be? Should it be that we
continuous learning? I would say. I mean. I think the past year for something has been evidently people have to change.
There's going to be a new educational system where we have adult learning forever.
Yes, I mean, look at the retirement age. It's been pushing forward. Is it 67 now or something?
Yeah.
And then you start learn something when you're 20, and then you stop learning when you're 24, and then you work with it. But things are going to change. I mean, we touched upon ML ops or AI ops and data ops and different kinds of titles for jobs that didn't exist 4 or 5 years ago. So people, I think, the continuous or rather acknowledge that people have to be reskilled.
Because that's touching on the job market problem and the whole transformation of the job market.
But before, I want to test another problem on the university. What's the disconnect between university and how it really works? So here we said, like, within your field, you think you're going to do ML and you do Excel parsing. Okay, one example, yeah. I think there is another almost bigger problem, is that in reality, to make data and AI work, I like the real data-driven systems that is actually used and augmented in core processes. It's quite clear this is a cross-disciplinary team play.
Yes.
So you need to have an AI process or data science process work together with the data and ML ops engineering process working together with the data ops process, working together with the cloud architecture of infra team, tech side, data governance. I need to be able to use this data, and then I move over to legal, commercialization, go to market, and by the way, this is the business domain we're in. So in reality now, this is the cross-disciplinary team play from hell. But in university, we still stick in our siloed departments, and in a siloed learns what is world-class data science process, which is good, but it doesn't prepare you for doing data science as part of how do my artifacts fit into the use case life cycle with all the other disciplines. And we don't even train that.
I think a sort of fact telling that this is a problem is that there's a market for educators.
Right.
This is what I do as a business.
Yeah. So I've taken lots of these courses myself for doing stuff. How does this work? And take some course, and they make me feel really smart because I'm just scratching the surface, and we should do it in 2 weeks. It says, and I do it in 3 days, and I feel smart. But of course, that's the way they're selling things like this. So I mean, there's a market for it. There's a need for it. And perhaps it's fine like that. But then again,
but the university has not prepared you to work in a cross-disciplinary setting enough.
No.
That's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, but actually, you turn it around. Could they actually do it?
Have you heard about the AI Competence for Sweden kind of initiative that is being tried at least?
I think so.
So I can just briefly say, it's an initiative where we basically give funding for universities to target education to industry, not only to students. And I think that's a really good initiative. Yeah. And then you have to really change how you do education. You can't have like 2-year programs anymore. You have to have crash courses or very much different type of education. It has had its challenges, so to speak, in being able to transform the universities to do that. But I think the intention is good. For GDPR.
But I think this can definitely be done. I'm from Borås, grew up in Borås, and Borås Högskola, this is in, they made a name for themselves, and they were competing with Ekonom Handels Göteborg. This is in the 90s.
Around the time when Borås Energi were around.
But Borås Högskola really grew up and is quite good and big. But it's around 2000, right? I have friends, like best friends, who they decided to go to Borås Högskola. Why? Because they could have a combined bachelor in economics and computer science. So what happens if we start looking at the career, how you build a bachelor, a master of marketing and data science? I think it's completely possible if you're innovative in how you want to define a curricula. It's not going to work if you are back in your academic silos and but I think it can be done.
Yeah.
So if you were to be deciding, in 5 years how academic or university education would look like, do you have any the simple question, to end the whole topic?
Well, the simple question, I would start by trying to find some metrics and measure things that are not correct, and then I will, iterate on it.
Good.
That's
a data-driven approach.
It's a political answer to.
No, but it's
But
good.
maybe we need data-driven approaches more in university.
Yeah. So we actually, I have to mention
Kill
this.
the dogma, right?
We did a small project a couple of years ago. DIVA, the big database with thesis work from most of the Swedish universities, not all of them. I downloaded and scraped 55,000 PDFs, mind you, of thesis
Is it
work.
legal to do that?
Yes.
Okay.
Or at least I found a way through their API and I could do it. And I've spoken to them about it, so they're cool. So I got these 55,000 PDFs. I extracted the text and the metadata and counted stuff, and it's a 20-year period. So the initial idea, we didn't have the time to realize this, but the initial idea was to compare the course catalogs from the different universities with what the people actually wrote about.
Interesting.
So you can see the connection there, and there's also a metadata field sometimes talking about whether it's a company that has sort of ordered this thesis work, commissioned the thesis work. So in this data set, you could actually see by language what are people from civil engineering at KTH actually doing in 2004. When they started in 1999, for instance.
That's really interesting.
So we have the data set. We haven't been able to publish the paper yet, but there's.
But you would expect that there is a disconnect between what they do in thesis projects and what you actually educated to, right?
Yeah. Maybe.
Yeah,
But the data-driven approach to prove, and it's not a bad idea. I don't know how to do it, but more metrics.
I mean, I think we can learn so much from the tech companies that we do have.
Yes.
Some A/B testing going on here.
Yeah. But I think, again, coming back to data, the problem is data and getting the data, and GDPR, as you mentioned.
So let's go here now,
Yeah.
please. Let's go here now.
So
GDPR.
New topic.
Really?
No,
Yeah,
not. So you said I want to talk about NLP and data,
yes.
and then bottom line. In a way, you said it a little bit like before we started. Like the older I get, the more I care less about the fancy stuff and I care about data.
Yes.
Could you elaborate on that?
Because data is what is actually making this tick. So it also the things that could fail projects. If you have bad data and high expectations.
So if we were to give a name for this topic, it would be something about data readiness or
data readiness levels.
Yes.
So
Good.
so let's start there. So when we approach people to work with, new peers, new clients, we usually start off by talking about this concept of data readiness levels, which Professor Neil Lawrence coined, I think, in 2017. There's a white paper. So he essentially says that, and this is really loosely modeled on NASA's technology readiness levels, the 0 to 9 thing. So technology.
So is this a product? No, this is something else.
This is not a product. This is like a framework for talking to stakeholders about their data maturity, if you will. So there are 3 different bands. Band A, B, and C. A is top, and if each band can have different kinds of levels in it. But let's start at the band level. Band C is where you start off. This is the accessibility thing. So is there data? I mean, you started Band C.
Can we Google this?
Band C level 4. Yeah, we have actually written a white paper on data readiness for natural language processing. So you can Google it. There's at Band C, you start out with hearsay data. Some manager had heard something about there's data. We have lots of data. We can do this. AI can do it. It's cool, guys. So we need programmatic access to data. We need it to be available at the fingertips of the people working with it. We need it to be lawful. Exactly. This is Neil Lawrence's webpage.
Neil Lawrence webpage, datareadiness.org.
Yes. So, but it's a good way of talking to this to people about it. But again, it's expectation management. So before you can do anything, you have to have data. It's Band C. It's the law thing that you have to have work with GDPR and stuff like that. You have to have your licenses sorted. You have to have the data accessible. You have to have it converted or convertible. So you do that all in band C. That's where we start. So the transition is from hearsay data, rumored data, to actually completing band C.
And even including PDFs, I see that.
Exactly. Good. So we are now speaking from an NLP perspective, but this is of course for any kind of data.
Yep.
So this allows us to have a lingo
Yes.
around, do we have data for this problem?
Exactly.
And yes, we have data, but what band is it in really?
Yes.
Oh, it's only in band A.
So
okay, we need to do certain things to get
Yes.
to band C. So then we can also manage the...
So band C is the top.
The
The
worst.
bottom.
So it's only in band A. So now we can manage the...
no.
Band A is best. The best.
sorry.
So we're moving towards band A. So we start out at band C.
Okay.
So once we cleared all this accessibility things, we go to band B, which is about validity. So could you
now you got...
could you trust
understand.
this data? Is it
The opposite.
is it true in a sense? Have you removed what about null values? Have you removed duplicates? Or is the data contradictory and such?
Do you think these things about doing this kind of pre-processing and data cleaning will be equally important in the future?
Yes, because it's so simple to do it. So
Is it really?
Yeah, I mean, if you got past band C, which you have to, I would say that you could do it quite cheaply, and you will gain something from it. But if you don't do it, it might be a stop.
Wouldn't it be more generic if you simply make the model handle?
Yeah, maybe.
the data?
But still cleaning. But if you do it, maybe.
But
I would love for it to be like that. Of course, I would like to just pour everything into
Exactly.
one USB stick.
Intuitively, this makes so much sense for me also from a management of expectations point of view. When you start off these projects, business always says, how hard can it be? You have the data. And you're always lacking a lingo to explain how much shit, how dirty it is, right?
Yes.
So if you can work on that lingo, and you can even teach your business leaders, this is band C stuff.
So
we need to do this.
So
first.
what we did, and I can come to that later on, what we did was actually to devise a couple of questions, or 6 questions that we could ask people and have them reason about, and then they would sort of, okay, I know.
Categorize their data.
Yes. So band B is not something we have worked with, because we either never get there, or the data is in such a good state that we could start off at band A. And band A is about the utility, and this is highly dependent on the use case. So if data is band A for one task, it might not necessarily be band A for a different task. And this is where the annotation, or let's even the case that where you have experts working with this. Experts are usually really good at knowing if something is relevant once they see the data. But
domain experts.
Yes, domain experts, humans, oracles, human oracles, not database oracles. When they see something, they can say, well, this is relevant because, and this is not relevant. But by not showing examples, they can't really tell. So you have to sort of elicit their information need in some way. This is at band A. Band A is also about annotating the data. So if you have to have training data, or at least evaluation data, because as Anders said, you need much fewer examples, fewer data points now to train something like a text classifier.
Yeah, we're going into the self-supervised or unsupervised.
But still, you need some data annotated to know how good it is.
Yeah.
So you can convince.
Active learning techniques.
Yes.
No.
That's different.
Active learning is different. There we can come to that. That's two modes to this as well. So this is usually what we talk about, and we came up with 6 different questions that you could talk about with your clients.
Because this is the beautiful thing, right? Can we break this down into a framework? Can we publish this open source? Can people start becoming more to become data literate? We need to find a way to discuss it and explain it and use it pragmatically.
So what I did was we wrote a white paper, and I published that on GitHub so people could submit.
You know the name of it if you were to Google it?
I really like this.
It's data readiness for natural language processing. Data readiness for NLP.
Yep.
It should be there.
And this is on GitHub.
Yes. Yes, the first one.
Fredrik O.
Yes.
Fredrik O. That's you,
me.
man.
That's me. So there it is. So this is what we're working with, and it's a appropriately vaguely defined framework. So you can actually.
I love the term appropriately vague.
I mean,
I love it too.
If it's too rigid and people will say, well, this doesn't apply to me, then they will sort of discard.
Can you say the positive way? It's appropriately generic.
I prefer Fredrik's. I prefer his way. It's much more honest.
So I mean, this is what we do when we start a new project. We usually do some sort of data readiness assessment.
So you have now, because what we're doing now is finding out what's the optimum way from ideation to production of a POC.
So this is the data side, but you also need to know what's your pain point.
Mm.
What's the problem you're trying to solve? What will you achieve? Let's not talk about the technology so far, but talk about the problem space. What's your business pain points?
Exactly.
And then we can talk about the data and we align them and see what kind of technologies are appropriate here.
So now we can go nerdy on the stuff I work with. Because what I really truly believe in is this cross-disciplinary way of working. And what I have found out is that we tend to, in the large organization, not think through what happens truly in the ideation phase, what happens truly in the feasibility phase. So we end up where, the data governance part or the data access part was forgotten, or the technology was forgotten. Or so if you evolve around the business value, the customer value, and you go around technology choices or algorithm into deployment and how to build, and then you go into data. So we've been working on this sort of idea on the framework of trying to, we work agile, agile scrum. That's not the point. The point is, can we at least agree upon what the different roles has in their backlog if we are in the ideation phase? And next on that, what are the common lingos and templates and methodologies? And what you can see is that if you can stabilize that, you can move faster on each use case. So this is what I'm working on.
Yeah.
I think it's completely fitting into.
Yes.
This is one. So now we're going into the data perspective, and what is our thinking in ideation phase around data? You should look at your band ABC. It's like a methodology that fits in the ideation phase. Fantastic. Do you see what I mean? I'm like,
yes.
And this for me is a huge problem. And this orchestration problem that we all understand what we should do. I think it's equally, or this is my main headache in the large corporation.
And I think it's all about managing expectations and making sure that we are talking about the same things and agreeing on the definition of done. And that's the third time I mentioned definition of done.
Yeah, and now definition of done. How do we talk about that when we have one guy is a service designer, one guy is a data scientist, one guy is a business domain expert who doesn't know shit about data? So we kind of need to find our common lingo, right? Or how do you see that? How do you do definition of done when you have different competencies in the same team?
I once was at a conference. It was more than 20 years ago. It was a human-computer interaction conference, CAI, in Seattle. On stage was this Sony guy. They had made some fancy small robot. And someone in the audience asked, well, how did you evaluate this? And the guy on stage said, well, we're shipping 200,000 units on Monday. That's the evaluation, how it sells. I mean, that's one way of measuring if things are actually successful. So, yeah. I mean, you have to, in some sense, make the bed for success, in a sense. So you have to have like you can't measure everything. You have to, at some points in time in a process like this, that's a leap of faith, I would say, but you have to have a stable ground for it.
Cool. And we're moving into the last 15 minutes here. And I'd like to move a bit into more philosophical kind of topics, if you may. And if we go to perhaps one of the more... let's take this one. Okay, so you know very well what the singularity means, and the movement towards AGI and having AI that moves closer, which are, we are very far away, of course, from human level of intelligence. Are you concerned that the movement and the work that you are doing, for example, is moving towards AGI and the singularity? Is that something you think about?
I have two thoughts on this. One is not a quote because I don't remember it word by word, but there's a podcast called Data Skeptic. Kai Polish is the host, and he once said, worrying about the AGI the singularity is like the Wright brothers worrying about the Wi-Fi on future planes not working out. So that's one way of thinking of it. I think that the AGI and the Singularity, I think we will have destroyed each other far before that, by means of bad, means of bad AI and recommendation algorithms that.
I have to really
So narrow AI can be much more dangerous earlier.
Yes. And just to speak about specifically, there was a report coming out actually I think this week from US. And they spoke about the problem of that US has legal restrictions on if they can use AI for warfare, and they were really concerned that they do have these kind of restrictions because other countries like China and etc. are not having them, and if they have these kind of restrictions, they will be far behind, and the AI arms race potentially is going to be won by someone else. What do you think about that? So I very much agree with what you said, for one, that AGI is not the big problem. The big problem is narrow AI. But when it's used for narrow tasks, such as drones going out killing people or whatnot, which is something we can easily do today, that's the big problem, not the AGI problem, potentially, I would argue at least. So how do we do that? Do you think this kind of report coming out in the US is good? Or should we simply say that since others are doing it, we should do it as well? Or what's your view on
that pretty much goes for anything, and that means that society is not stable. It suffices that one people is doing something that someone else wants as well, and then have to follow suit, or otherwise you will miss out. So the fact that the report, I haven't seen it, but the fact that the report is out there and people are talking about it, it's good. I think they could have kept it a secret, perhaps, or perhaps they do and just work on it anyways.
I think everyone is working on it secretly, but now there was a public report.
Was it in France they were allowed now to use AI for this? They claim that they shouldn't.
I think in US at least, in some states, it's okay to use drones, but not for lethal weapons. But for non-lethal weapons, it's apparently okay.
I also think this is like a gliding scale. I mean, the drones they are using now for lethal, weapons, the piloted ones. How much AI is in there?
Yeah, but at some point it will be more AI based.
Autonomous. Of course, I don't want AI. I know what AI can't and can do, so I don't want that to make any decisions. And if we can't make self-driving cars safe, I don't think we should have self-driving cars with guns.
That I agree with.
But you said you had two angles on the Singularity.
Yeah, but the first one was the quote from Kyle Polarch in a sense. So I think we should think of it, and I think the debate has been much more nuanced the past year maybe than it was before, with Max Tegmark and all, and Nick Bostrom and the other ones. But I think we should not let that take our focus from where we are today and what kind of challenges we're facing as a society. And I mean, the future is always 10 years away, right?
But someone else said, I forget if it was Kai or Daniel, who made a very good summary definition. It's like, let's worry about the AGI problem later and focus on how AI could support a sustainable world now.
Yes, I agree with that.
I think that's pretty good.
I mean, it's no question that AI can be of very positive use and beneficial use, so to speak. But don't you think we should start thinking about the potential ramifications if we use it for bad things as well?
Yeah, but not from an AGI perspective.
No, ignore AGI for now.
So from a narrow AI perspective, yes. Ethical AI, yes. But here and now, I think here
and now, we can easily have an AI that disrupts the stock market, or we can easily have an AI that are used for drones.
Yes, we should definitely think about that. Definitely, and
I agree with that.
So yes, I don't see a contradiction between that and the AGI and Singularity. It's just different people thinking about it. I would say we are quite many people, and it's strange to sort of project my own inabilities to others. I mean, I might only be able to keep one thing in my head at the same time, but we are many people. We should be able to think about different things simultaneously.
And just to mention what Kai said, I think very well, is that, of course, if you think in general what AI can do for our society, And if we look at this kind of report that came out with Anna that we had on the
Yes.
show as well,
Anna
in Nature,
Fellender.
that said, if we want to achieve the 2030 sustainability goals, AI have a significantly more positive impact than negative impact in doing so. So it's no question that AI is just a tool, it's a technology,
Yes.
and just as you can't remove biology, you can't remove nuclear, you can't remove genetics, and you can't remove AI. It's something that will continue to evolve. It's just that we need to move it in the right direction in some way.
I
right?
agree.
Yeah.
Completely.
Cool. Should we go for the divide kind of thing as well? I think we touched it so many times, but still I think it's interesting to just hear Fredrik's thoughts about that. Unless you have some other topic you'd like to...
No, we talked quite a bit about how we understand the AI divide, and then we have on this show framed it quite a bit around that we understand the world right now, that there's actually a few tech giants who really is leaps and bounds in maturity of having industrialized, operationalized AI compared to the rest of the world. And we've been sort of exploring what that means from a societal perspective, both how we can do to fix it, but if it's a problem or not. What's your views on this? Have you thought about?
I don't think it's a problem. I think it's not everyone could be Usain Bolt. I mean, there's some athletes out there doing good things. It's the long tail of everyday exercise people, motionärer, that makes a difference, perhaps. So, again, I don't think there's a contradiction between. Perhaps not a divide. There's someone leading the way and showing what's possible, and some people want to follow, and maybe not all should follow. Maybe not all should be Usain Bolt.
But do you think there is a difference in how the tech giants, the big ones, in US and China, are moving and using data and AI in a way that is accelerating a lot, and the rest of the company are trying to keep up, but the speed, the derivatives, so to speak, of how fast they're able to make money from it, for one, or simply build products that are really useful and good, is accelerating faster for these few selected companies compared to the rest of the world.
Yes, I think so. I mean, they have like a 20-year head start.
Yeah, and so I want to disagree with you a little bit here, because
That's good.
I think I'm not. It's great that someone is Usain Bolt. That's not really the problem, that someone is Usain Bolt. The problem is when you have too big inequalities in a society.
Yes.
So basically, the real problem is that the tail now is too far away, and
you're speaking about companies and their competencies with respect to AI.
Yes.
In relation to the big ones.
Yes. Exactly like that. And why I sort of even why I want to sit here and talk about this and spend every week on this is because I think it's a societal concern to the point where we will have disruption from because when they're so far ahead on AI and it's a general purpose type technology, stepwise they apply that fundamental platform and AI operationalization know-how. They have so much money so they can easily buy themselves into a new domain, and then when they're in this domain, they are in such a position where basically the general purpose AI can simply be for them easier. And my thinking has been going down the last couple of years, has been like, from a societal point of view, all this old job losses, all that, I think it will be looking very different if the normal Swedish companies is disrupting themselves, reinventing themselves, rather than it's an outside force from 10 companies in the world. This is the concern I'm thinking about. So I'm not saying they are not the problem. It's us not picking up the ball that is the real problem.
So the delta, the difference is
the delta, the inequality.
Yes.
You have the riches and you have the haves and have-nots.
Yes, and I think that might be a problem. It depends on what hat I'm wearing. If it's from a scientific point of view, I want to see someone spearheading and doing great cool stuff. If it's from like a citizen's point of view, when I want everyone to have the same opportunity, it could be really bad. And given that the net worth of the biggest companies are like in the range of countries. It's they are players in their own rights, and you could see that, for instance, Facebook and Australia and the media laws last week. But you can also see it in the way that the US, for instance, is trying to regulate the big tech companies now. There are lots and different, attempts to break things up. And I just one of the things is that Google.
Can you just mention? I think the Australian kind of fight against Facebook, etc., is very interesting. Can you just elaborate a bit more what that was?
So what I'm as far as I understand, it's essentially that the Australian government wants the big tech giants to pay taxes or to pay money if they link to news produced by other entities like news outlets. Yeah. And there's pros and there's cons.
And what did Facebook do?
Facebook said, no, we're not going to do it, and it sort of shut everything down on their own platform.
So they didn't even link to any Australian news sites anymore, and they lost like huge amount of traffic because of it, right?
So and then it took a couple of days, and then the Australian government reverted this decision. So there are different things at play here, and one thing that I'm really, really worried about is that if the primary or like quality quotation marks quality now news outlets are gone, there will still be low quality or non-quality news outlets on Facebook, which people might not be aware of, and they still get their news and their filter bubbles all over again. So this is not a good development.
It's a difficult situation. But let us try to end on a more positive note, I think. And even if we have this kind of big tech giants, and if we try to compare, for example, Sweden compared to US or other European countries or even China, I would argue, and I would like to hear what you think about this, is that even though we have tech giants, if you take the average company in US or the average company in China or the average company in Europe even, and compare it to the average company in Sweden, I would argue that an average company in Sweden is rather well ahead compared to other continents when it comes to data readiness, technology level, and ability to use AI compared to most others. Would you agree?
I only have anecdotal evidence of this. A few data points. I was in a call this week with a small company in the south of Sweden that manufactures steel things, and we were working there with data, and they talked about their business system and everything. And he said he kept excusing himself and saying that, well, we're not really good at this. And the only thing I heard was that he had this tremendous machine where he inputted everything, and they was like agile and working on the floor and doing this, steel things. And so, from these kinds of stories I've heard, this I would agree with you and say that people think they're not, adepts because they see the flaws in their own processes, but they are quite good at what they're doing.
I would certainly think so. And compared to a lot of other European and especially US and China companies, I think we are actually on a rather good position in Sweden. But then we have the tech giant. But that's a different.
But as the last topic now, if you allow ourselves to run over 1 or 2 minutes, where do you think, from the anecdotal or the cross section of companies and public sector you meet and stuff like that? Where do you think they should put their focus and emphasis to take, we say that we're not as bad as we think, but we have a long way forward. Where would the most bang for buck go if they invested in like this? I mean, you hinted, care about your data is one example, right?
Yeah, that's one example. But I would actually go a step further and say that you should do an inventory right now of your pain points in your business, in your processes. Where do you spend the most time? Where's the most errors? And then try to see, is there a data-driven approach to actually mitigate this in a way? And then go to data and then see what kind of technology.
So really start thinking about lining up your core waste or problem areas and see which ones of them can be translated into a data-driven approach.
And not really... not really mapping out what people say they're working, how they're working, but actually looking at the ways they are working.
Getting then also your real metrics maybe on some of these.
Yes.
This is one thing. I think we have too few hardcore sharp metrics on some of these topics. I mean, like, so we need to be customer relevant.
Yes.
What's your metric? I don't have one.
Awesome.
Okay.
Low churn
Good,
rate.
but it's a good. I think that's a good, very good, simple advice. Inventory your problems, and that could be solved by data.
Become more data driven. Fredrik, what's next in your life, privately or professionally?
Oh, I don't know. Keep working. I mean, for me, working is. There's a very blurred line between work and private life because I need to have a job that I enjoy. It should be worthwhile thinking of it when I'm, going to bed or whatever, or Saturday morning with the coffee. If it's not that kind of job, it's not worth having, in a sense. So I enjoy the team. I enjoy learning. So for me, people and learning are the most important things now. And RISE, I think, is one of the best places to be right now for me.
And what do you want to learn next then, if I flip it?
If I want to learn next is actually, well, I have some really hardcore tech things I want to learn. I want to know more. Multilingual models. Yes, multilingual models, I hear someone whisper. It's something. Something I want to know but not learn, like French. I would like to know French but not learn French. But then again, I would like to know more about, in the real life, real world, how the organizations work with data. How could we actually make this, make it better for people?
Yeah. Put it into operation.
Yes.
Sounds great.
Sounds awesome. Can I ask the last question?
Please.
Who do you think is a good guest that you would like to invite?
I knew this. I actually have a note.
Thank you.
Well, there's a lot of things going on in the city alone. I mean, in Stockholm alone.
Yeah.
So there's a bunch of companies I would like to know more about, and there's a bunch of people I would like to hear. I'm not sure where to start.
Do the inventory, do the list. I love it.
Top three at least.
Top three.
Okay, so Hedvig Källström, KTH,
Yes.
Silo AI.
Of course.
I would like to hear about her work at KTH and how that marries into Silo AI. Therese Mannheimer, Grace Health. I would like to know, I know because I have a former colleague that is working with them and he's working on NLP stuff, but the business as such.
It's interesting as well.
Female health. Ingrid av Sandeberg, Validio.
Lydia, what do they do again?
It's data cleaning.
Oh,
I don't know much. I haven't really contacted them. I will contact them and ask.
Yeah.
Oskar Tekström, Sana Labs.
Sana Labs.
We spoke about the thing about keeping up to speed with what happening.
Adult learning,
Yes.
next level.
Also perhaps Maria Chidel from Adressia. So they're providing addresses for people who don't really have addresses.
What do you mean?
If you have to have healthcare and you have to direct someone to some people and they don't have an address, what do you do?
Postal address, you mean?
Yeah, postal address. So she's one of them I would like to hear. And then there's a bunch of companies, or I actually have 3 of them here. Depict.
Yeah, they're on the list.
Yeah. They're on the list, yes.
Good. Moduli.
Yeah.
Good. Mavenoid.
I don't know.
Configuration things. I think they have really good use cases, and I know they work.
Is it really based on Maven then? XML?
No.
Okay.
Mavenoid.
Direkturgatan.
Yes.
Okay. Why did you choose a name Mavenoid?
I have seen some demos, and it's really impressive.
Okay, cool. Awesome. A lot of very interesting suggestions there. I love it.
You were well prepared for the last question.
I actually got the questions from others. So.
Yes.
You killed it.
This one.
But this was really, really good. And we have some on the list, but we added some more here. So that's really good.
Super cool.
With that, Fredrik, it's been a true pleasure. I wish we had a longer time to speak about all the topics we didn't have time to mention. But it's really awesome, at least for me, to have
to go nerdy, go NLP,
fellow researcher
NLP.
in NLP and in AI, that we can speak about things in
kids in candy stores, right?
Yes.
Love it. Thank you very much.
It's been my pleasure. Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you.
Thank you.